Black joy is really a form of resistance in a world that oppresses us and makes us want to feel like, we're wrong, that our bodies are wrong and we shouldn't be here. And it's just fighting against, all the systems, the media, all these different things that are telling us, the narratives about ourselves and just reclaiming, our identity, our truth, and just basking in this world, right? Just being who we are, being true to ourselves, being the reason why they kind of, they need.
Welcome to Vulnerability Muscle, the empowering podcast challenging norms and guiding you to find strength and power through vulnerability. I'm your host, Reggie D. Ford. In a world that often portrays vulnerability as a sign of weakness, I believe it is a source of tremendous strength and authenticity. Through insightful conversations and thought provoking interviews, Vulnerability Muscle aims to redefine vulnerability and help listeners develop a new perspective on their own lives. Each episode of Vulnerability Muscle delves into a variety of topics such as mental health, social issues, and mindset shifts. We explore the power of vulnerability in healing, building resilience, and promoting personal growth, as well as fostering meaningful connections. This podcast provides practical tools and strategies to navigate life's challenges, overcome adversity, and create more inclusive and just environments for all people. In this episode, we have Benaias Esayeas. Benaias is an Ethiopian American immersed in the community in Nashville, Tennessee. With a degree in neuroscience, he's the co founder of the Black Mental Health Village. As a driving force behind the movement, he's on a mission to revolutionize how we approach mental health within the Black community. With compassionate, trauma informed, and culturally sensitive approach, Benaias and his team are reshaping the narrative and eradicating the stigma surrounding mental health. Beyond this, Benaias is fervently dedicated to reshaping healthcare education with a vision focused on health equity, violence reduction, and diminishing incarceration rates in marginalized communities, all through an economic healing and health justice approach. I cannot wait for you to hear this. It's a very informative episode. I learned a lot about his experience as an Ethiopian immigrant, and how his identity has been shaped and changed and evolved over time. And then, some stories about how he feels our society operates and things that it can do to be better. And so, with that, let's hop into it and embrace vulnerability with Benaias Essays. My man, Benaias, how you doing, bro?
I'm doing well. How you doing, Reggie?
I'm blessed, man. I'm blessed. It's a weird time in life, um, of just transition and growth, and I think it's a lot of growing pains that come with that. But embracing those, because I know there's always been those things, and on the other side, it's been a lot of good. So I'm embracing it and expecting the good.
Mm, I love
Yeah,
that. I love that.
yeah, man.
Growing pains. That's a topic.
Hey, it is because
Yeah.
there's grief and growing pains. There's a lot of stuff in growing pains, but how this is a question I got asked on a podcast recently, and I thought it was fantastic. And I feel like you'll give me a good answer to it. How's your heart today?
Mm, that is a good question. People just stop me in the morning like that. I mean, um, I think my heart is solid, in the sense of, like, early in the morning. I already received an email that kind of like shook me up, but I like took a walk and just processed it, and I was like, all right, now, like, we're gonna make this work. We're gonna compartmentalize it, and so, I'm not letting it impact the rest of my day. So I would say solid, because I'm, solid in my reasoning and in my understanding of the situation. So, just sticking to that.
Yeah,
How about
yeah.
yourself?
Good question. Heart is this week has been tender. I think I said that in therapy yesterday. I was like, my heart's been tender. A lot of things tugging on it again with transition. I think that's one piece. We're recording this in October, and October is a month that used to be full of celebration, and now it's a month of mourning and grief. And the celebration was around like all my grandparents were born in this month, and so
Mm,
we literally from the first. my grandmother on the first, another grandmother on the third, and my grandfather on the 22nd. Like we would celebrate, and now they're all gone, and it's a moment. It's moments where even if I'm not thinking about it, my body remembers it. My body and my mind remember it, and I just feel the emotions come up even when I'm not trying to think about it. But I think I'm glad to have that awareness though, because if I like snap on somebody, I can collect myself and say, what's really going on? And
Mm.
so I think that's good. My heart is also, and I got a friend who's going through some mental health struggles right now, and I'm being a support system for him, and just trying to provide support and comfort, and then allowing him to do the work. I think it's important for people who do find themselves in a place of support for others that ultimately, like, it's not my responsibility. It's not I can't go and do all the things. Everybody has to do their own work, and so I can provide resources, provide support, and do that, and then let it play out how it does. And so, yeah. And then, yeah, man, I'm excited. I'm excited for this conversation. I've been excited to talk to you for a minute. So yeah, man, I'm excited. I gotta jump in with this because we talked about it, but and we can get back to it. But Black Boy Joy is something that I know is heavy on your heart always, and something that you like to talk about. What does Black Boy Joy mean to you?
I think Black Boy Joy for me
Or
is
black joy in general, not just boy.
yeah, a Black Joy. Black Joy is really a form of resistance in a world that you know oppresses us and makes us want to feel like we're wrong, that our bodies are wrong, and we shouldn't be here. Um, and it's just fighting against all the systems, the media, all these different things that are telling us the narratives about ourselves, and just reclaiming our identity, our truth, and just basking in this world, right? Just being who we are, being true to ourselves, being the reason why they kind of they need to copy our culture in order to sell their products, right? So it's just us just being unadulterated us, right? Just not wearing a mask for anyone else, but just being purely ourselves. Embracing the vulnerability within our lives, within blackness in itself, and all that comes with it, and just really seeking the beauty, the love, the safety, the care, the community that comes from all of that. So it's a form of resistance. It's a form of like keeping myself sane, right? Like for me, because it's sometimes you need to just like do something for your inner child to just take care of you, instead of thinking about, oh, how do I please society, how do I you know carry out my role, whether it's being a provider, being a father, being a son, this, that. So it's taking time to reflect on your own needs, and just letting yourself be free. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's what it means
Freedom.
to me. Yeah.
Freedom sounds good. I like freedom. You mentioned inner child, and for someone who has never heard that term before, describe that. Describe what you mean by that.
Okay, so an inner child, I guess, in my perspective, is growing up. We are children, and based on the relationships that you had with your providers, or based on the relationship you had even with the world, with friends, this, that, you create a self concept of yourself. And in that self concept, you, like, that child wants to be taken care of, wants its needs to be met, wants to receive connection from the world, from family, from those around you. And oftentimes when people face trauma, their inner child is in a state of survival, and so as they grow up, they still have that inner child that wanted to be safe, right? And when we get in patterns of behavior that are, like, when that are harmful to us, it's because instead of reacting to it as an adult who now has this new understanding based on all the experiences that we've had, we kind of revert back to this inner child self, and that inner child feels the the unwantedness, feels the lack of safety, feels the loneliness, feels the not having needs met, and instead of reacting as an adult would, right, we act as if a child would, and so we're angry, we're yelling, we're doing all these things that adults really shouldn't do, but it's because we're operating from a place of hurt, and so it's yeah. So inner child is who you were when you were a child, and that's that self concept that we often carry with us once we grow up.
Absolutely, man. That's a great description. Great. I do a lot of inner child work, and like just to your point, like growing up, so much of our identity and self construct is tied to those early years
Mhm.
and personality and behavior and all of that. And like some of the things that we didn't get as a child, I, at least through my healing and my therapy, I'm providing that for myself now. So sometimes it's called reparenting. I might do some parts work or internal family systems and things like that. Just
Mhm.
different types of therapy, play therapy even. But like I got one of the, when I got a remote control car and a coloring book, because those are two things that I had a lot of joy around having remote control cars growing up. And then coloring was something that I enjoyed, but it became this burden because it had to be perfect and like overly perfect. And
Mhm.
so I my first time getting a coloring book as an adult, and I just like scribbled and none of the colors made sense and none of the like, but I finished it. One, like there's another one I tried to do before that, and it was like perfection and get in the lines and all that. And I still haven't finished it. And that's been like a year and a half, 2 years. But the one that I just like fucking had fun with and colored all over, I finished it. And it's cool. And I'm proud of it. Like, and so just doing things that like your inner child needed is so important. And I think just like playing and frolicking and doing whatever you got to do is so important. How did you get on this journey of one, you could speak to the mental health village, but how did you get on the mental health tip and being an advocate and being the person that you are professionally?
I think personally, I'm just experiencing the world, and there's the term Black identity development. So I'm an Ethiopian immigrant. Moved to the United States probably when I was 5 or 6 years old. I'm 29 now, so lived most of my life in the U.S. And so growing up as an Ethiopian immigrant, and we retain our culture. My mom cooks Ethiopian food all the time. We'd go to school and people would be like, "Why does your clothes smell like onions?" Right? Because Ethiopian food is cooked a certain way, right? So there was that bit of like understanding that culture shock, and then that want to kind of assimilate so that you can fit in more with um, the people in the U.S. So that was something that we experienced. But at the same time, my parents were very strict about us not losing touch with our roots. So we still speak Amharic, and I thank them for this. But so we grew up in a very traditional Ethiopian household, and in that, like my mom, I would always remember her saying, "You're not black, you're Ethiopian. You guys are not, and she'd make this distinction. And growing up, I realized just how harmful that statement was. And I understand why she said it because she wants to bring the cultural aspect. But in the United States, we're seen by every white person and everybody else as a black person. No one's gonna be like the cops, especially, are not gonna be like, "Are you Ethiopian or are you black?" before they shoot. Right?
Right.
And so, not understanding that created a dynamic where it was almost as if my mom was trying to create a like, oh, we're different than them. And Ethiopians have this like understanding of like, oh, if we do that, we can protect our kids from the same harms that black students are facing and black families are facing, right? So they see it as a protective thing, but the way they do this, like the way that they create divisions, it's more in line with white supremacy, right? And so I started realizing some of these things, but more it's when I started getting in trouble, right? And just seeing the ways in which these systems were intentionally designed to make us feel worthless and make us feel like, like, oh, this is the best that you can do, right? Like, you can't be better than this. And I was almost starting to believe some of these lies that they were feeding me about myself, right? And this is when I realized, yo, like, all black people are being fed these same lies, and these lies are being fed on a systematic level. And because it's on a systematic level, oftentimes we're seen as just, oh, you're the bad actor rather than the system is, at fault, right? And so it leads a lot of kids to internalize these negative self concepts and you act out based on these self concepts, right? And so that was when I started realizing just how much this all affected my mental health. Also, around I was living in Houston, Texas, and I was probably 17 or 18. I got a license, and within 2 years, I had been pulled over 20 times.
Wow. Wow. For what? Were there any causes or reasons that they gave?
I mean, once it was like in a drive-through of a Burger King. We had a cop from the front, cop from the back. They sandwiched us. What are you doing? Who's in your car? And I'm
I'm
like,
getting
we're
a
getting
burger.
food. Yeah, we're getting food. I had to give every person's name in my car and where they're living, and that I was their ride, right, just to go home.
Wow.
And they let us go because there was nothing. Um, Other times they would like we get pulled over, and they would be like, "Oh, somebody called in for suspicious vehicle or whatever," and then they would come check our record and be like, "You're free to go," and I'm like, "Can you tell me what was wrong?" And they're like, "You said you're free to go, boy. You want trouble?" And I'm like, "All right, so we're
Mm,
done here. I'm gonna go home."
mm. Yeah.
So it was really not for a particular reason at all
Yeah.
in any of the cases, other than driving while black.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
GWB.
this continued to like form my understanding of like how blackness is viewed in this society and how we're seen as a threat. How how I'm a threat as a black man, just inherently.
Just as your existence.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
so that and the mental, impact that it has on that. I anytime I saw lights flashing, I had race based stress,
Mm-hmm.
where police come in, anxiety, right, like sweating, like
Mm-hmm.
almost like I'm having a panic attack every time,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And it made something like that's a joy, like driving, such a pain for me because I was just like, what if this happens? What if that happens? Right? So I began to really understand the ways in which these kinds of experiences impact the mental health of black people, and going back into the history and learning about the green books, it's for a reason, right? Like, people have always had.
Explain the green books.
So the Green Book was a set. It was a book that was published by Black people that outlined certain stores, certain gas stations, certain food establishments that Black people can frequent without being discriminated against during the Jim Crow eras. And so Black people have never had the chance to travel freely without being bothered, because our sole existence has always been seen as a threat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so, like, and I feel like that in itself shapes our mental health, and that was when I was starting to learn, wow, like, there's some real psychological warfare going on that is impacting the mental health of Black youth and Black
Mm-hmm.
children, Black families, right? And I mean, we can get into the family reporting system and how they police families and tear families apart, and how all of this is rooted into the history, because the way they breeded Black families and separated them and used them for labor, right? And we still continue to do this because really it's in the form of prison labor, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we
Yeah.
know black people are disproportionately imprisoned, falsely imprisoned, and we know prisons are billion-dollar industries.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
I started to make the connection that the reason why our communities are so underfunded and under-resourced, and the reason why we don't have adequate, healthcare, mental health care, is they're waging psychological warfare so that we acting out being, just responding to the violence that's already in your community with whatever, responses. And based on that, people get incarcerated, right? And
Mm-hmm.
they have a whole system that's benefiting off of that.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so that's really when, I started to, better understand how these systems were interconnected, and how, the schools were designed to kind of teach students how to be controlled and how to be obedient rather than how to flourish in whatever topics that they're, most proficient at. And so even the way that we teach people is akin to the way that we hold people in prison, right? It's
Yeah.
very it's very, let's control them rather than let's cultivate them to be the best versions of themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. No, that man, that's fantastic. And I think my book and what you just described the big theme in my book. Is like there's absolutely acute familial trauma within, my unit, of things that I can pinpoint and say this happened to me by this person, or this circumstances occurred and that was very traumatic. But in writing my book, I go back and I'm trying to understand, why did that happen? Why did my dad go to prison? Why did I experience, see people using drugs, and why? Just why? And it goes back far and far, through generations, and seeing how minds were shaped, and how people's sense of hope, or really learned hopelessness, was created.
Mm,
And that leads to very dire thoughts and destructive behavior, because if you feel like you can't get out of a situation, and it's constantly being, pushed over your head and beaten over your head, that like you're stuck in this dark place, um then what do you do? What do you turn? You get desperate. And I 100% agree with how you've just described that. But for somebody who hears the word white supremacy, who hears oppression and doesn't live your life, how do you help them understand what you mean by uh it's a movement, it's a resistance movement, like those terms, for someone who may be fragile, have some
mm.
fragility, or never experienced living as a black person? How do you communicate that to them, to where there's empathy built there?
Well, I would kind of,
Even if you don't feel that
yeah,
it's needed,
yeah,
because I
no,
think
yeah, yeah,
sometimes we
yeah,
try to
yeah.
tone down things. But I want to hear if you, even if that's the answer.
Yeah, no. So generally, through Black Mental Health Village, I center Black people. So those kinds of questions I wouldn't necessarily answer. Um, so through Black Mental Health Village, I don't really center whiteness. So that question would not be answered through the lens of Black Mental Health Village, but through Benaias, I understand that like we have to, talk between different people in ways that people really understand, and not really use these kinds of buzzwords. So what I would kind of say is like explain to people how white supremacy affects white people, right? And how these different systems, right? Because it's not just white supremacy; it's paternalism, right? And we see that or the patriarchy, right? People talk about the patriarchy. One of the ills of the patriarchy is white men are dying at alarming rates from suicide, right? Because
Mm,
they're so lonely, because they have a hard
mm,
time creating connections, right? So I would argue we're all suffering under these systems because these systems don't favor anything but domination, right? And we
yeah,
cannot live in a world of domination and use these tactics and expect results that are anything but violence. Whether
yeah,
whether it be, interpersonal violence, whether it be, intrapersonal violence, people, doing harm to themselves. That is a consequence of people learning that it's okay for other people to treat them poorly, to other people to harm them. It's okay for political violence to occur. It's okay for economic violence to occur, right? So when somebody's homeless, they're like, if the government doesn't care about me, why should I care about me, right? And so I can
Man.
harm myself.
Yeah.
So it's understanding that violence comes from the society first, right? People are not inherently violent. People
Right.
learn what's going on in their environment, and they learn to cope in ways that keeps them surviving.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so what we need to do is create a society that is not so inherently violent. And the ways to do that is to censor everybody, to censor everybody's humanity, not just the humanity of those who have been chosen, like on the basis of like they have the different systems working for them to make sure that they're not disproportionately impacted by some of the
Mm-hmm.
harms that exist. But I guess another way is, getting people to understand this whole issue of like privilege in a way that, white just because white supremacy exists in the society doesn't mean that there aren't white people who are suffering, right?
Right.
White
Right.
people are suffering, and just but it's more understanding what the cause and effect relationship of these things are, right? Like white people are suffering because we're not investing in rural areas,
Yeah.
right?
Not
White people
because
are
they're white.
suffering because white people are suffering oftentimes in states that haven't, for instance, expanded Medicaid, right? Because there's so many black people that live in those states that the practices that we use to be intentionally racist also impact white people negatively, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that just so we won't get a majority black population health insurance, we're also screwing all the white people that live in that state as well,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that's the way that we got to see it. And there are different books that I can cite later on because I can't remember at the top of my dome.
Yeah.
Talk about the ways in which you know white people are giving away their self interest just on the basis of like racial resentment.
What's up, Vulnerability Muscle fam? We've got an amazing sponsor to talk about today, and it's a product that has truly made a difference in my life. Call Me Go. Now, I only bring products that I believe in, and this is one that has been a game changer for me. Whenever I feel stressed, whenever I feel like things are just piling up and the anxiety is really cranking up, I turn to my Calm Me Go device. This is it right here. This thing is literally a game changer, and I was skeptical about it at first, but what makes this thing stand out? It combines three scientifically proven methods to reducing anxiety. First, there's a grounding technique, multisensory stimulation that really helps you stay present. So you have the feel of it, there's a vibration factor, there's lights, there's also smell. Then there's that scented element, tapping into the power of aromatherapy. But here's the kicker, and what really sets Calm and Go apart is personalized breathing regulation. It's like having your own breathing coach in your pocket, in your hand. And so I use this when I'm gearing up for podcasts, when I'm starting my day, when I'm calming down and chilling out at the end of my day. It has been an absolute game changer. I love Calm Me Go because it's not a one size fit all solution. It's tailored to me, my body, my unique stress triggers. The impact it has on my daily life is undeniable. Now, I want you to experience the calm that Calm Me Go can bring to your life. Head over to callmego.com and use the code Reggie444 at checkout for a fantastic $30 off. Trust me, this is an investment in your well being that you won't regret. Visit callmego.com, use the code Reggie444 at checkout, and let Calmigo help you find calm in the storm. Dang, that's powerful. And then, it makes me think of the 2016 election and seeing how white women voted. Like just like and you can have your political views, but I think when you look at a candidate who is the most qualified candidate we could have had, but is on the other side of the political spectrum from uh, whatever people have historically voted or believed in, it's just like it was an absolute no, and they gave up their self interest. Wow, that's a powerful statement. Uh, I I uh I think I agree with you, and I think I love that like Black Mental Health Village is focused primarily on Black empowerment and not necessarily appeasing anyone else. Like it's like let's focus on us, let's heal. And I that's something I'm so radically for is like healing myself, healing ourselves collectively, because I think that's how you make real change and real progress in the world. What have you experienced your personal mental health um on the backside of, you mentioned some of the things that, getting pulled over and being, discriminated against. Have you seen like mental health conditions arise from that affected how you showed up every day?
Definitely. I would say anxiety was one of the things that showed up for me, and so just learning how to manage the anxiety. And there have been ways that I've managed my anxiety poorly using poor coping techniques. I like pledged a fraternity, so there was a whole drinking that goes along with that, and even that led to some of the mistakes that I made where I got in trouble for that, right? And um, but at the same time, not only did I get in trouble, but I also saw the different ways in which I got treated differently than the white kids who were at the college that I was at. Um, like I would literally be, um, like I had campus police like grabbing me, this, that, whereas white students would break, black students' nose and be okay to, walk home alone or this and that. So there was a lot of different issues, and so like drinking definitely was one of the ways that I coped in college because I was also a transitionary period for me. And we were talking about transitionary periods, but I was living. I graduated high school not living with my parents, so we were not in the best of terms. And so when I went to college, I pledged because I wanted that like family, fraternity, the brotherhood, right? And because I was feeling lonely, right? I was not even talking to my own family. I was like, my bank account is my bank account. Whatever we got from here is us. Let's make this happen, like which was kind of the case since probably like 15 or 16, but it was just a lot more salient. So it was just um, yeah, there was it was I lived a different reality than most of the kids that I went to school with. A lot of them came from wealthy families, and I had some friends who like their parents would send them like 5K a month allowance, right? And I'm over here working at the dining hall, like washing
Wow.
dishes, like
Yeah.
doing working at the mail room, all the different things. But even I had my own privileges. I would admit I had some classmates that would also work, but they had to send money back home, right? So privilege comes at different tiers, and even somebody like me, I was privileged in that instance because I saw what they had to do with their money. I used that money to party and to like work hard, play hard. So there was those instances, but really um, the anxiety, the drinking, definitely got me into some issues where, um, like I remember one time I was really drunk and the campus police said we didn't have a good conversation. So then they take me to the drunk tank, the town drunk tank. Yeah, instead of letting me go home like they do, like most of the other students, right? So then from there, I'm like, yo, like, please don't kill me, please don't. Like I'm just pleading, right? And then next thing I know, I'm being rushed to the hospital, and the hospital, like the doctors are trying to figure out how much blood I lost, right? So so that further put me in a state of trauma, and I felt unsafe.
So in
And
that moment, what occurred, do you know?
well, so I remember like me backing up, trying to get away from the officers. I don't exactly know what happens, but all I know is there's blood all over my shirt and all over my pants, and I was saying, please don't hurt me, please don't kill me. So I wake up and there's a campus police still in the bed of the hospital, and then they finally leave once they realize that I'm like okay, right? and then the doctors are trying to figure out how much blood I lost. Um, and I'm like, yo, don't run any more tests because I'm a broke student. Like I don't, I'm not trying to get it. Any more hospital bills. I already got to pay for this ambulance ride, so I'm just worried about the money. And they're like, we're trying to figure out how much blood you lost, and the campus police is there, right? So then in the morning, I get a cab ride back to the school. I talk to the person at the school, and I'm like, "Yo, what happened? I need like the videos of that." And they're like, "Oh, it's against our policy to give video." I'm like, "No, that's not." And so they were like really pushing back on that, and then they were like, "You had a nosebleed. That was all." And I was just like, "That was not a nosebleed." They're like, no, you just had a nosebleed. Does not look like all over your shirt and pants. Like my shirt, I came back with my shirt and pants, and it was, like, so there was that experience that I had where then they like finally let me go into my dorm and they buzzed me in. What they should have done the night before, um, and I got in, but it was so then that was like another strike on me, right? So, but at the same time, like I didn't get arrested. I just had an ambulance bill, so I was like, well, as a black man, this is somewhat a win, right? I was like, I'm cutting my losses. Um, so I let it go and just went on. But it wasn't until the school actually had something called Amherst Uprising, which was when all the black students came together in the library and started speaking about the horrors of what they've been experiencing, that I like realized like this is a systemic thing. Like I thought this is my individual pain that I had to shoulder on my own, right? Like I was like, and I had to be quiet about it because it was like I'm on scholarship. I'm not trying to ruin my opportunity, right? Like I'm like, all right, like I'm not good with my family right now. This is my only way out. I got to secure, this degree and make sure that I like my goal is also becoming a doctor. So I was like, all right, we got to just continue going with this. We got to, make sure that this doesn't affect us. And so I just, didn't make a fuss about it because I really didn't have the agency. I was like, I'm beholden to this financial institution or this institution that's like, giving me this opportunity. But when we had the Amherst uprising and all the other students started to talk about their experience, I was finally able to, discuss mine as well. Um, and that in itself was very cathartic, and that's when I started realizing the power of like black spaces, right? Because before I was like, it didn't make any sense to me, like what, but like I was like, oh, it didn't make any sense to me because I was kind of growing up in the lens of like white proximity as power, right? And then I started realizing, no, it's power, but they still gonna treat you differently, right? You can be as close to them, but you're not gonna get the same. You can't make the same mistakes that they make and get away with it. And so it was a powerful realization for me.
Wow. Wow. I want to point out some things that you just said cuz so you were going to school in the Northeast. This wasn't like deep South. This was in the Northeast, the more quote unquote maybe progressive part of the country, studying to become a doctor. You studied neuroscience, right?
Yep.
Here you are studying neuroscience, and then because of the effects of the mental health toll that your life had dealt you, alcohol became a part of your coping and then led to certain situations. But even still, like when you were treated, it was treated differently than other people and led to a very traumatic experience. And I'm sorry you had to experience that. That no one should ever have to go through anything like that. And but then finding this community, uh, it's good to find community, but it sucks that the community was built around this oppression and this maltreatment. And leads to some of the great stuff that you're doing now. But like that is when I hear stories like that and I read some of my comments or people like it, like whenever I talk about mental health, it's like, okay, whenever I talk about race, it's absolutely like that's not real. That's not your experience. And I'm like, how can you deny someone's lived experience? Right? You cannot deny someone's lived experience and you have actually lived through this. And so anyone listening who's felt, any type of defensiveness as it comes up. Like, this is a man talking about his experience. I don't want that to be known, and like this is real life. Um, so thank you for sharing that, because I mean I can imagine what it's like to even think about those thoughts and going through that. Um, I'm proud of you for being the man that you are and who you show up to be. Like, honestly, I really am. You mentioned something that I want to touch on. That at the time, like as a teenager, you and your parents' relationships had had fallen apart a little bit. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but can you talk as much or as little as you like about that relationship and what kind of drew the wedge between y'all?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing was religion. So I grew up a PK,
What is that?
pastor's kid,
Oh,
or preacher's kid. So my dad was a
okay.
preacher, and it was essentially at a certain point I started questioning certain things and um, didn't want to attend church, and that was a big thing for them because that was my family's very devout. We would go to church, Sunday school, this all the third. Uh, so I guess the sentiment that it created within my family is how, or at least for my dad, was like, how are you going to preach to the crowd when you can't get your son in line or something like that. So he took it out on me, and there was a lot of resentment built, and then just issues with just not seeing eye to eye, and then the whole, if you're living under my roof, kind of rules. Sometimes even like, hey, like getting angry and like being like, get out then. So I was like, all right, that's it. Like I I rather not live under somebody's rules when I don't know, if they're going to be constant, right? So that was what really drew a wedge, just the souring of our relationship through the different conflicts that we kept experiencing.
Hmm. Yeah, it's tough. I My last recording actually was with um they were folks who grew up very religious and had struggles with religion, but ended up ultimately being very devout in their faith. And we had almost an hour discussion, and I did not intend on that, but just about how they reconciled their love for religion with the harm that it may have caused them.
Mm,
uh, and it was beautiful. It was beautiful to experience that, and I just was like, with an open mind and heart, tried to absorb that and take that in. But I think in families, especially where any religion is so strongly rooted, and there's someone who thinks independently from that, it causes division in some way. And so, how is your relationship with your family today?
now we have a good relationship. I still don't call enough, so that there's still some issues on my part, but like we're on good terms. Yeah, so it's all love, and that was kind of what I had to reconcile. Was like, regardless of what happens, like if something does happen to them and I don't reconcile my relationship, I'm gonna be more hurt later on, right? And so I was just like, let me not have regrets. Let me, be the bigger person. Because sometimes you have to realize that, your parents sometimes, tried their best, or this they could. Not that like that's okay, and that you didn't deserve to get your needs met, but like sometimes not everybody's able to meet your needs, and you have to compartmentalize that. Like there were some things that you couldn't have done, but you did a lot for us. I'm a son of immigrants, so they can be like they can use the whole "we traveled all this way and sacrificed our lives there." So I'm like, yeah, I'm understanding of what they've given up for us. So
Yeah.
I
Has
was
there
like,
been
let's come to a resolution of, and we just we started talking more during COVID. Actually, we were talking like every week and just
wow.
family meetings and stuff like that. Uh,
Wow.
so we definitely did a lot of things to mend that relationship.
Wow. How did that initially start? Because I can imagine. I mean, I'm a person who I'm estranged from my parents, and but how did that first interaction or first set of interactions begin? What did that conversation look like? Who started it? And like, I don't know, some pointers for people who may want to mend those relationships.
I was faking it till it wasn't feeling as fake anymore. Right? It was because I emotionally numbed myself so that it no longer they no longer could hurt me. So it's like diffusing a bomb almost, right? Because or diffusing a trigger because that trigger has disappointed you so many times that I was just like, I need to disconnect your ability to control and impact me. And that was my way of coping. And so I had to figure out, all right, how do we, put the circuit back on and reprogram it to work in a way that works for me. And so it had to be with the boundaries, with the setting, the tone of like, this is what I expect, kind of like modeling the behavior that you expect, right? But it felt fake. It felt fake, and I felt like I was just doing it. But then you keep doing it, and you keep doing it, and it's like, all right, like this is okay now. Like I can do this again, and so I was able to allow them to affect me more. But it was yeah, it was almost like I had disconnected um, from them so that they can affect me anymore. So I was trying to see how to reconnect that.
And on their part, was there compromise? Was there change in behavior? Was there change in thought pattern?
Yeah, I think particularly my mom, especially, she did a lot of her work. Um, I remember, yeah. So I grew up to a OG Ethiopian mom, right? So I remember one day I was in college, and she calls me out of the blue, and she's crying, and I'm like, "What's going on?" She's like, "I'm so sorry that I like spanked you and your brother this
Wow.
particular one time."
Wow. Oh, she's talking about one instance that she
Yeah,
remembers.
yeah. No, this one particular time, she went OD, right? Like we're like we're in Ethiopia, so there is no rule. There are no rules, right? And she the neighbors had broken the glass. Like the door had like a metal frame, and then it had glass on the back, and they were trying to like kind of knock, and this kid got locked out. So he was trying to kick his way to get our attention, and his leg slips, and it breaks the glass. All the kids run home, and me and my brother start cleaning the house because we know we about to get the ass whipping of a lifetime, right? And my mom comes in and she's like, "This is sus. You guys are reading books, right? Like, none of this makes sense." So then, so we have housemaids in Ethiopia, and the housemaid like made lunch for her. She's sitting and she looks at the door and she's like, "What is that?" And then, man, so my mom she was like, "Go upstairs, take off all your clothes." She brought out like a luggage strap.
Wow.
She told us to get wet in the shower, bro.
That's the worst. Oh, that's the
She
worst.
was and then we're like, we had told the housemaid, we're like, "Yo, if you hear us, like, please come help us," right?
Oh
So she comes to
man.
help us, and my mom's like, "Unless you want some too, you better leave," right?
Wow.
So we
Wow.
had gotten the ass whooping of a lifetime that day, and so my mom calls me like sophomore year of college, and she's crying, and I'm like, "I'm so sorry," and she was like, "I don't know what was wrong with me," like, and so she was dealing with some of her mental health challenges, which was like she had anxiety, and just dealt with like her way of coping with anxiety was being in control of everything. And so she was dealing with a lot of that, and that's where the forms of punishment came from as well. And so there was a lot that she was realizing and then apologizing for. So I think there, yeah, one those kinds of moments really showed that, hey, like, we are all just humans trying to figure it out, and sometimes we make really stupid mistakes. And sometimes it's like those are the lessons that I want to take moving forward, right? is like not saying the wrong thing just because you're angry, because people will always remember when what you said to them and how you made them feel. And like that's the kind of experience that I took of like what are some, like I've had so many people, probably like 3 or 4 people, like wreck my car, right? And I'm always like, "Are you okay?" Right? Instead of immediately going off about, "Oh, you did this, you did that," because it's like we gotta always prioritize people's humanity over the objects that are broken. And kind of like the coloring thing, right? Like we want to be perfectionists and color in the lines. For me, it was like messing things up. You can't mess things up. You can't break things. Uh, and it's just like no, like it's okay. People are what matter the most, right? And we can't say really hurtful things that we can't take back on the basis of like meaningless objects being broken or meaningless things being ruined, because really like we are what matters, right? We are what we got. And so those kinds of experiences, but definitely setting the boundary, setting the tone, because like I'll yeah, they'll know when I'll start retreating, right? When like if I'm not dealing with something, or they'll know that like I will argue back and forth till the cows come home if I don't agree with something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm
Which is
very,
healthy.
yeah, I mean it is healthy.
It can be
People see it
healthy.
as
Yeah.
conflict, but I'm like
Yeah.
I don't want to not be like a authentic version of myself just to keep the peace. Because it's not a real peace, and I'm not keeping the peace within myself. So it's like,
Facts. Oh, yes. Yes.
yeah, that's kind of the ways that I've had to deal. But a lot of it was fake. A lot of it was just like, all right, we in this, we doing this, you know.
I'm glad to hear that, even just to get that apology, even no matter how many years go by, to have an apology from somebody who hurt you physically, right? And I'm sure emotionally through all that as well. To get an apology is it means the world. So I'm glad that she had the space to be able to do that with you and being able to go back into that relationship. Was there any did you go to therapy? Did you have you been to therapy? What are your thoughts on that?
So currently going to therapy. I have my appointment tomorrow at 5. But I had just gone back to therapy recently. I've been uninsured for a while, so that has been like a barrier. And the other things, when I've gotten in trouble with school and things like that, ironically, so I was seeing therapy there, but then ironically, uh, when I needed therapy the most, like oh, you no longer have access to the health insurance or this or that. So that was the other big piece for me, is understanding that like the way systems are built, when you need help the most, you lose it, especially for somebody who coming from a low socioeconomic, background. If you don't have access, if you're not in these schools, you don't have, steady access to health insurance, right? If you're not always employed, like 40 hours, you don't have steady access to health insurance. These are the barriers to people who are feeling distress, or feeling difficulties during their time. So I wish I've always had access to insurance when I needed it the most, but it's not always been that way. Currently seeing it, and we haven't really focused on my family because I feel like that's something that we dealt with. But in the moment, I was seeing somebody when I was at Amherst, and the first therapist was, oh, I didn't really care for her. She was just doing a lot of validating, and I was just like, all
Hmm.
right, so how do we work on things? And
Yeah.
I'm trying to
Give me
be
some
better.
next step.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's like you can't just be like, wow, you went through so much. Like I'm like, all right, I don't need that. Like how do we now deal with the aftermath? Because
Yes.
our
Yes.
experiences are impact our brain, like they cause
Yes.
neuroplasticity, changing of the brain in the ways that we're now reacting to different stimuli, different experiences differently. And I want to react in ways that's conducive to better health for me, to creating better relationships. And so that was my thing. And then the next, so then I was seeing somebody outside. That one, he was a lot better. and we were talking about kind of working through some of the issues with my family, and kind of the decision that I had made to, like, all right, let's just let bygones be bygones, and not like forget things or act like we're all good, but start the steps. So I think that session and that therapist was helpful
Good,
in getting there.
good. In the same spirit of that, in your Benaias's thoughts, not representing Black Mental Health Village, what are, or even you could actually come speaking from a Black Mental Health Village perspective, what are some steps that we can take as a society to better the mental health issue that we face, the race issues that we face? What are some productive solutions that we can do to address those from a system level?
From a system level. Whew, Lord. Okay, so from a system level, I would say that we need to first recognize the ways in which all of the different systems are impacting different groups of people disproportionately, right? And in doing that, we would see how the education system and the lack to teach Black history is causing us to not really understand ourselves, and we're essentially accepting whatever the media tells us about ourselves because that's what's most prominent in our experiences, right? And whether it's when it's talking about healthcare, we got to talk about the ways in which our healthcare system is keeping us from having access to it, right? Not only that, when we do have access to it, we got to talk about the ways in which, for example, mental health system, we're being restrained, and like violence is being enacted on us when we're going to seek care, right? So we got to talk about that. We got to talk about the ways in which the family policing system, they're using social workers to break up Black families when the real issue of neglect is about not having the economics to provide for their families, right? So instead of seeing people as something that's that's that as people that have something wrong with them, or some that they're deficient, we got to see people and humanize them in ways that we're like, what are the resources that they need, right? What resources would my family need in order to secure a safe and healthy environment for them and a future for them? So in those ways, if we analyze each system and the ways that it's waging violence against Black bodies, the ways that even our names can affect whether or not we get employment, right? Unless we act on these kinds of things, unless we act on the fact that there are Black women getting sued right now for the Fearless Fund, right? A fund that's trying to give Black women grants, but they think that's racist and against the Civil Rights Act, and we know there's like less than 1% VCs who are Black, who are focusing on Black women. So it's right. We have to understand that there's these systems that exist that are enacting violence, and they don't want us to be great, and that's what's in us, right? Our destiny is greatness. We come from greatness. We got to learn our history, right? Because if the system won't do it, we got to realize that, like, hey, I come from greatness and I have the ability to exude this greatness. I just gotta not let myself get brainwashed by society, by other people, and I really gotta, figure out what my passion is and be in line with it, as you started in the conversation this morning.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. What is Black Mental Health Village doing in that regard? Because you're doing so many fantastic things. Can you talk to some of the events, some of the programming, partnerships that you have to affect change in the community?
Absolutely. So we operate under a healing and health justice lens, and so healing justice is not only do Black people have to come together to heal from the harms, but it's acknowledging that these harms have been rooted in white supremacy, oppression, right? And so the way that we heal ourselves have to be culturally sensitive to the ways that we've been hurt, right? And so, one, creating spaces where Black people can feel safe to come together, things like support groups, things like our community mental health discussions where we just talk about things openly, right? Creating different opportunities for healing through partnerships like Nashville POC Sangha. We do our Healing for Healers meditation, And we also have a partnership with Melanin and Mindfulness, and we do yoga together, right? So just creating more opportunities where Black people can come together and make themselves and their healing the focus. Um, so those are some of the things that we do. We are also helping people get connected to therapists who look like them, right? So we have a directory that helps people get connected in Tennessee. It's creating initiatives for the HBCU students, who are struggling with their mental health, both here in Nashville, as we've seen, 2 suicides last year at TSU, but also, in Tennessee statewide. So making sure that we're not ignoring colleges like Lane College, and making sure that everybody has additional resources to get their needs met. And it's also, we're working with elders who are raising grandchildren, right? Because as we know, the elders right now, they have already seen Jim Crow. They've already seen the hardest. They've lived through the hardest part of being in the United States, and now they're suffering again, and now they're trying to care for another generation, right? And so we're trying to make sure that not only are they getting their mental health and their needs met, but we're also trying to make sure that the needs of the children are being addressed, so that we can take care of their mental health needs. Because oftentimes, when you're dealing with parents who are not there because they're incarcerated, or because there's substance use in the family or something like that, these kids act out, right? And what that system sees is, oh, it's another Black kid. We got to put them through the school to prison pipeline. But we want to make sure it's like, no, that's a kid that's traumatized, that's dealing with ACEs, and we got to make sure that we provide positive experiences. We got to make sure that we provide positive connections to help them build resiliency to overcome that, so that they don't become a statistic. So it's making sure that the village is really coming together, right, to ensure the safety of the people who belong to it.
Yes. Wow. Beautiful. I love all the work that you're doing. I'm supporting 100%, man. I want to switch gears for a little segment I do. It's a quick, rapid response of first thing that comes to mind. And so I'm going to ask a couple of questions, and you just like whatever it is that you can think of, let me know.
All right.
All right. What comes to mind when you hear the word vulnerability?
I don't know. Shame.
Mm, shame. If you could have a conversation with anyone, living or dead, who would it be?
Franz Fanon.
I'm not familiar. Who's that?
He's a French psychiatrist. He has he's written the book "Wretched of the Earth" and "Black Skin, White Mass."
Okay. All
Yeah,
right. I'm gonna have to check that out.
yeah, very very interesting insight about the ways in which being oppressed in this society affects our mental health and our psyche. So a lot of Black Mental Health Village, the ideologies, I definitely stem from the way he's described some of the theories in his books.
That's what's up. What is one of your favorite childhood memories?
Mm, so I was little. I remember in Ethiopia. My brother and my cousin were playing or watching a movie, and they wouldn't let me like watch movies with them. So I'm like, all right, I'm gonna just go outside exploring, and I go out exploring, and it's like kind of like a meadow, and I walk really far, and then I see a goat tied to a stick, and I'm like, I want to ride it. So I untie it and get on top of him, and I ride him for a little bit, but then he like knocks me over, and then I start chasing after it, and then I get lost. So that, yeah, and I was like, man, that is probably the most joyful like young me story that I can remember. So
Oh, I love that. Shout out to Black Joy right there.
yeah,
Oof, man. I know you've mentioned a couple, but what is a book or movie that everyone should read or watch?
yeah, I'm gonna just go ahead. Well, you've mentioned this, "The Body Keeps Score." I think
Mm,
mental health wise, that's a pretty good book.
hmm.
"Rest is Resistance."
Okay.
Trish,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Definitely. Okay. What is one thing you do to relax when you're feeling stressed?
I think probably go on a walk.
Mm, yeah.
Although I don't do it enough, but like because I'm dog sitting, I've been doing it at least twice a day.
Oh, you just reminded me of something. Oh, that is so funny.
But
So when I saw you last, I think in person was in the neighborhood, and I was with my little brother because he was having a birthday party for his daughter, and we in the hood, right? We in the
yeah,
hood, and my brother and his friend, they saw you walking the dog or whatever, and I'm sitting there, I'm like, why are y'all so on edge right now? And they're like, man, who the hell is this dude keep walking around here with these dogs? And
yeah,
I'm like for real? And like this is before I knew it was you and saw who you were. And like they're like, yeah, we strapped up, this and this and that. I'm like, okay, like what's going on? Like, and this is me, like, I'm in a different space mentally. I don't
yeah,
even think like that no more. But
yeah,
and so you walk by again and like, look, there he is. He looking over here. And I'm like, it's Benaias. Come
yeah.
on. So like, bro, like I cannot tell you how like it was such I felt the growth in my life,
Mm,
right? The growth from a very hard, hyper vigilant mindset to where I am now, to be able to see a stranger look and not think it's threatening or think that I need to be on guard. And then to know like it was you and to know like the work that you do, I'm like, that is so ironic. But it was a powerful experience. So walking the dog, that's hilarious. I had to bring that up.
yeah. No, that was a good. That's hilarious story. I remember that.
Yeah. All right, and last question. What is the number one podcast you've ever experienced?
Man, I'm gonna have to say embracing vulnerability with Reggie Ford. You got to come on the show.
Hey, appreciate that, my dog. Appreciate that, my dog. How can people get in touch with you, Black Mental Health Village? How can they get plugged in? You want to talk about some ways to contact you and reach you?
Yeah, absolutely. So www.bmhv.org or BMH Village on social media, all platforms. We on Twitter, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram.
Definitely. Man, but nice. I appreciate you, Black Mental Health Village. I appreciate all that y'all do. With all the things that you could be doing and all the places you could be. I appreciate you being here with me, embracing vulnerability.
Absolutely, man.
Real.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, sir. Love, bro.
Have a great day, man.
Take care. Thank you for joining us for another powerful episode of Vulnerability Muscle. I hope you found inspiration and valuable insights that resonate with you. If you're enjoying this journey of self discovery and empowerment, there are a few ways you can support the podcast. First, make sure to hit that subscribe button so that you never miss an episode. If you've been moved by our conversations and the mission of redefining vulnerability, please consider leaving a review. Your feedback not only motivates us, but also helps others discover the podcast. Share your thoughts on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you tune in. And don't forget to spread the word. Follow us on Instagram at Vulnerability Muscle for updates, and you can connect with me personally at Reggie D Ford on all platforms. Visit vulnerabilitymuscle.com for additional resources and upcoming episodes. And remember, embracing vulnerability is strength. Thanks for being a part of the journey. Until next time, stay empowered, stay vulnerable, and keep flexing that vulnerability muscle.